Can you hear me, Martha?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Hooray.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
50 minutes of podcast, 45 minutes of technical shenanigans.
Only on day one.
Hello, it's been about 2.5 months since Donald Trump won the election back in November, which means, Mark, it's about 2.5 months since we last podcasted together.
Wow, so much has happened since then, domestically, geopolitically as well. A ceasefire in Gaza is the news that we've been focusing on this past weekend. A ceasefire that many would argue would never have happened had Donald Trump not been about to enter the White House. Elon Musk as well, a feature in the final weeks of Donald Trump's campaign. Now it seems a central feature in Trump's incoming presidency.
Musk has also been here in LA, which is where I am, and that's where a ferocious political row has erupted over the recent wildfires. It's hard to believe, given all the talking topics, that Donald Trump's not even in office yet.
Yeah, which is exactly why we're back here with this new podcast. News happens fast around Donald Trump. So we're going to bring you updates daily, Monday to Friday, for the first 100 days of his second term. So welcome to day one of Trump 100 with me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kelner.
And me, Mark Stone.
We're recording this at lunchtime on Sunday afternoon here in Washington, D.C. So actually, it isn't quite Inauguration Day here yet, but by the time you're listening to this, it will be.
We are always going to give you a time check on these episodes because of the time difference, but also because if Trump's last 4 years in the White House were anything to go by, things are going to be moving so quickly, they could well be changing as we record.
Speaking of things changing, Mark, they did 2 days before Inauguration Day.
Yeah, an almighty change. I mean, a logistical nightmare would be an understatement. For I imagine the many thousands of people who have been trying to organise this once every 4-year event over the course of the past few months. In fact, I remember noticing at the White House, must have been two months ago at least, they were building huge temporary structures outside the White House for the world's media to gather. Here on Capitol Hill, there have been miles and miles of railings erected for this extraordinary, momentous event. And yet, Friday lunchtime, I was here in the Bureau, and suddenly, as is the way on social media, a post from the incoming president announcing that for the first time, he said, since Ronald Reagan in the 80s, his inauguration would not be happening on the steps of the Capitol building. Instead, it would take place inside. It is supposed to be extremely cold indeed. Although I have to say, some are suggesting that there might be other reasons why he's decided to move it inside. Who knows? Conspiracies. But on the face of it, the weather.
But you're right, the whole comparison thing, because when he was inaugurated first time round, there were gaps, weren't there? People said the crowds had not turned up. We won't get that shot. We won't get that crowd gauge of popularity. His opponents are saying that's exactly why he's taken it inside. Who knows? You're right, though. When it's cold in Washington, D.C., it's proper cold. I was covering the Jimmy Carter funeral a couple of weeks ago, and that was an endurance event in sub-zero temperatures. Trump is saying that he made his decision for the safety of those watching the ceremony, the first responders, police dogs, even the horses, he said. He said he didn't want them on the streets as he gave the traditional speech on the Capitol steps. My route to work actually takes me along Pennsylvania Avenue, where it was all supposed to happen. Tell me, what do you think of the fact that it's now indoors?
Well, I think it's a bummer since we had tickets and now we can't really see him. But if that's what he feels he has to do, then that's fine. But yeah, it's a bummer.
It was a little bit disappointing to hear that the inauguration would be moved indoors, but I guess it also is what it is. And there's a lot of people coming here now. But hopefully I'll be able to catch a good glimpse of him anyways.
I mean, it's a little bit of a bummer, but at the end of the day, tomorrow at noon, President Donald Trump will be president of the United States, and so we're excited. If it's a weather thing or a security thing, don't know. I mean, but it's okay. We're making the best of it. We're still celebrating and have a great time.
So instead, his inauguration speech and all the pomp is going to come from inside the Capitol building, inside the rotunda, that room underneath the Capitol building's iconic dome that everyone is familiar with. And it's going to be live streamed rather unglamorously into the Capital One Arena in the Chinatown area of downtown DC, where he himself says he will be heading straight after the ceremony. So this is going to have a very different feel, this inauguration. He is going to effectively be holding a kind of rally in a stadium similar to all those that we saw during the campaign.
Yeah, and that Capital One Arena is where he's having his official MAGA victory rally on Sunday evening. It's kind of reminiscent of that famously controversial Madison Square Garden rally that took place during his election campaign. I know you were at that rally, James. This is his kind of venue, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right, Martha. I actually go there once every couple of months to watch the Washington Wizards basketball team cheerfully getting ritually thumped. That's where the Washington Capitals play as well, the ice hockey team. Good luck trying to keep your eye on the puck from the cheap seats, though. But, it's Washington's version of Madison Square Garden. Yeah, it seats 20,000. But, you mentioned that Trump event in MSG, and we remember the fallout from that. Some would say scandal. Remember the supposed jokes about Puerto Rico being a floating island of garbage. Kamala Harris was called the devil, the Antichrist. It wasn't Trump who said these things, but he was tarnished by it. His opponent said it was everything you needed to know about Trump politics. We read that America was appalled, and yet, look at him now. Enough Americans clearly were content to vote for him nonetheless.
And moving this inauguration ceremony inside has, as I said, caused a logistical nightmare, not just for organizers, but for the many thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of people who are turning up for the event, who thought they were going to be outside on the Mall. Some of them will be because they'll brave the cold. Some will try and get inside. 250,000 tickets sold, only 20,000 seats in the Capital One Arena. It's going to be messy logistically for sure.
Yeah, and Mark, we're sitting here. In a few hours, you're going to Trump's night before rally. That's in the same arena. Let's fast forward to that now. Time travel with the benefit of some late night editing to give us a sense of it.
Well, it's just gone 4 o'clock here in the Capital One Arena. Donald Trump due to arrive very shortly indeed. And take a look at the mood here. It resembles any one of the many Donald Trump rallies through the course of the campaign. Of course, this one is different because he's won. This is the victory rally on the eve of the inauguration, and it is full of Donald Trump's supporters and his staff as well. We've just caught up with Jason Miller, senior advisor to Donald Trump. And I asked him about the so-called special relationships. How are Britain and America going to get on? Some suggested it could be a little tricky. And will Donald Trump agree to Peter Mandelson being Britain's ambassador? Some suggestion he's not so keen.
Okay, let's look at what's going to happen today. Donald Trump's second coming. He'll officially become the 47th US president at midday, which is 5 p.m. in the UK, the moment he will make his inauguration address. Mark, what are you expecting? What kind of tone?
Well, I mean, let's reflect first of all on what this speech is and what it traditionally has been. A moment of unity. That's kind of been the basic model for the speech way back since George Washington delivered his first back in 1789. I guess it's a moment to mark the beginning of a new administration, a moment of celebration. Humble in tone is how many of the previous presidents have pitched it, acknowledging, I guess, the challenges of leading a nation like America. And we will all remember some of the catchphrase moments. Barack Obama, starting today, we must pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and begin again the work of remaking America. JFK, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And Franklin D. Roosevelt, back in 1933, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. These are deep moments of history until Donald Trump came around last time, because he framed it altogether differently. He began his first inauguration speech, "We are one nation," but then he went back to his style, This American carnage stops right here, he said. America is full of rusted out factories scattered like tombstones. In fact, it was such an unorthodox speech that George W. Bush, who was there back in 2016 for that first speech, is said to have leant over to the person sitting next to him and said, "That is some weird shit." Of course, that's precisely, James, what it was designed to be. Steve Bannon, who was then at the heart of the Trump White House, isn't this time, but is still an ardent supporter. Steve Bannon said, "We didn't win an election to bring the country together. The goal was to take on the elites with a blowtorch." And this time around, that same Steve Bannon was asked the other day whether or not the first 100 days that will be following of this Trump presidency will be shock and awe. His response, you know what it was?
Go on.
It won't be shock and awe. It will be days of thunder. And so I wonder what speech, given that context, what speech Trump will choose this time. I do think, though, James, that we will get a somewhat different tone this time around. He's won. He doesn't need to be in campaign mode. He can project forward. What lots of Trump watchers often say to me is that but behind all the rhetoric, behind all the showmanship, he is a somewhat different guy. That doesn't mean he has mellowed his views, but his tone, perhaps, a little bit more mellowed.
There comes the moment where Trump will head to the president's room for the signing ceremony. That's where he makes his cabinet nominations official, and he'll also begin to sign executive orders.
Critics of Trump would say that this is the moment that he fulfills his pledge to be a dictator only on day one, because an executive order is a written order from the president on the way the federal government will be run. It doesn't need to go through Congress. It doesn't require legislation from Congress or a vote in Congress. It's not unusual. Presidential executive orders are very common. Every president has signed them. Well, I think the difference this time, going back to what Steve Bannon said, Days of Thunder, is that Donald Trump has pledged to sign as many as 100 executive orders, which would be unprecedented in his first few hours in office.
Martha, immigration will be a feature in those first few days and, Trump's plans for it. That's why you're not with us here in DC. You're on the move.
Yeah, I'm about to head to LAX airport on my way to Chicago. And Chicago is the place that Donald Trump's new border czar, Tom Homan, a man who you'll probably hear quite a lot about in the next 4 years, he's called Chicago ground zero for mass deportations. And it is a city with a lot of migrant workers. Some of them are undocumented, and deportations happen there regularly. But officials from the Trump administration have pledged to ramp them up in the days following his inauguration. And in fact, one aide just in the past few minutes saying that enforcement will begin, in their words, the moment that President Trump puts his hand on that Bible and takes the oath of office. So lots of reporters here saying more ICE agents are being sent to the city. So we're heading there basically to see what happens and see if Donald Trump and his aides come good on their promises.
Yeah, it seems like it will be front and center of the Trump agenda.
It certainly does. It's, the mantle in which he, ran his election campaign on. And Trump was telling NBC News, our partner organization, on Saturday that mass deportations remain a top priority for him. And during his first term, Trump also promised mass deportations, and he did deport a large number of people, more than 1.5 million, which sounds like a big number, but it's actually fewer people than were deported in Barack Obama's first term, and similar to the numbers that were deported under Joe Biden. What's different with Trump, and this played out during his first term, is that fewer people were coming across the border from Mexico, which is something he's pledged to continue. So the people he did deport last time were being raided and arrested in cities across the US, which was part of his shock and awe policy. And it's almost like being seen to be making a difference is the big thing for him. And it could be that that sort of imagery is what the deportations in the next few days will be about.
Migration is going to be a massive, massive visual focus over the next few days. And it's kind of worth I think, pointing out precisely what he means, that these are undocumented migrants. That there is an argument about whether he will focus on those who are said to have committed migrant gangs, as they've been described, or whether it's going to be a wider wash-up of undocumented migrants. And I think where this gets controversial, one, it's going to include people who have been here illegally, but have since had children here, who would therefore be American citizens. So we could see families being split up. The other controversial thing about these deportations is that many of these people have been here for many, many, many years. In fact, they have jobs, they have lives here, and they also pay American taxes. So they feel American, and they've been trying to get their undocumented status changed to become Americans. Obviously, that's a process that we know takes a very long time. So these are people who will have the rug pulled out underneath them, will be sent packing, despite having lived here for, in some cases, many years, decades. I think there is no question that the next 4 years will be hugely, hugely consequential, not just for America, but for the whole world. No question.
I think you're right. We all have a stake in Trump 2.0, and it means a lot to a lot of us, from house prices to world peace. So stay tuned. That really is it for now from us. If you've liked what you've heard, please do subscribe to the Trump 100 feed, wherever you're listening, and maybe tell a friend as well. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow for day 2 of Trump 100. See you then.
1 down, 99 to go.
See you then.